Hey, everybody. Welcome back. I cannot believe 7.5 years has flown by. 8.5 years since I started working on this show. And I've got a great guest for you today. This is one of my favorite part of doing a show like this is meeting people and getting to dive deeper in. So without any further delay, let me introduce to you this week's guest. Today's guest is on a mission to help entrepreneurs significantly impact the world. She's a seasoned executive coach with over 2 decades of experience. Her expertise spans from coaching clients with 8-figure businesses to solo entrepreneurs, with a focus on simplifying the complex and bridging the gap between theory and execution. She specializes in creating systems that consistently deliver prospects to your door daily. Whether you're a consultant, coach, speaker, or work in any industry that involves person-to-person sales, she can help you establish a predictable, repeatable system that takes the guesswork out of sales. Please join me in welcoming Michelle Nedelec. Welcome, Michelle.
And the fans go crazy. Thank you, Roy. I'm
Uh,
thoroughly excited to be here.
yeah, and thanks for joining us from Calgary, Canada. Love that technology makes this possible. So, this is a show about building strong networks, and the context is leadership. So tell me, how do you define leadership, and when did you realize you had the skills to lead?
Those are great questions. And I define leadership as the ability to be able to entice people to follow your goals. So a lot of people think that you have to be in a management position, or you have to hire people, or you have to do a lot of things. And the truth of the matter is, the second you say, hey, I had this idea, you're essentially in a leadership role. You're attracting your ideal clients. You're enticing your spouse into the idea that you're going to go and do this crazy adventure and it's going to be fun. Promise me. I think in high school, I realized that there were people that had innate abilities to be leaders, and there were people who just wanted somebody else to come up with the idea. And it's like, hey, I would totally support that. As crazy as it is, and we will go do this and it'll be a ton of fun. I think if we can have that same attitude in business, we have way more fun with it.
I love that.
Because one of the kind of scary parts, and I think you've seen this before, is when somebody gets promoted to a position because they're really good at what they do, or they're the owner of the business. They go, hey, I have to hire people, so now I need to lead people. And then they decide that they're going to discover some leadership skills. It's kind of a little too late now. I mean, you'll work on it, but it becomes a really expensive habit to do it that way. It is far more lean on your business and your career if you start to look right now, right here, right now, wherever I am, whatever I'm doing. Every time I open my mouth, I'm in a leadership role. How does that play out? Then you start to look at it completely differently. And it's okay to start studying things. It's okay to start sharing your information. It's okay to be enthusiastic when you're excited about an idea. And then that it becomes a lot more fun. So to answer your second question, when did I learn I had this leadership thing? I think it was in high school when I had these really inane ideas, and it was like, hey, compulsive urge, why don't we go do this? That's when I think it really hit.
I love that. In high school, I got a pager. I'm dating myself here because I got tired of us sitting around in the parking lot trying to decide what to do. And so I would take a friend or two, we'd hop in my car and go do something. And I'd say, when y'all figure out what you're going to do, page me. And if it's better than what we're doing, we'll join you. Like, I just was like, that whole standing around thing. Like, some people, that's kind of how they operate. And I was like, we're going to go do stuff. And if I could attract a few people to do it. But I'm kind of curious, Michelle, who you were even younger than high school. Like, who were you on the playground? What kind of kid were you? Did you join after school activities? Did you run for office? Did teachers see something in you? Like, were you the quiet kid watching from the back of the room? No, okay, that wasn't Michelle. Yeah, what kind of kid were you?
Well, I think a fun story. Okay, so way back when I was 2 years old, apparently, I started doing this. I remember doing this, but I don't think it was quite 2 when I remember doing it. But I would often go get my winter boots on, my little winter jams, whatever it was, and I would trek outside. Like you said, I'm from Calgary, Canada, so winter was winter. I go trek outside and go and visit my neighbor, Maria Markovich, who was the adorable Czechoslovakian woman who lived in an acreage kind of kitty corner to us. So this is a substantial trek for anybody in the middle of winter, let alone a 2-year-old. I'd be going through barbed wire fences, over snowdrifts, through the cows, just to go and have milk and cookies with Maria, because as soon as I got there, she always had milk and cookies for me. It was great. And she'd always talk to me about life back home in Czechoslovakia. And her husband had been in World War I, her kids had been in through World War II. I mean, she was just a plethora of great stories. And the other neighbor kids would never do it. And I'm like, oh, well, my dad's French, and that's why I understand her better than you. Like, maybe that's why I do it. It had nothing to do with anything. He didn't even speak a lick of French to me. But it was just so much fun for me to go over there and hear the stories and be enamored with life and what she had to offer. When I was about 5, I was walking down my driveway and I saw the neighbor's house was on fire. Like, there was plumes of smoke coming out. So I ran up the driveway, told mom and dad, I think Jackson's house is on fire. Go and get buckets in. What else do you need? And mom's like, we need shovels, we need buckets. We'll go do that. And she's looking at me like, why do you want to know? So I said, I'll phone everybody. So they left. I got on the phone, phoned all the neighbors and said, Jackson's house is on fire. We need 5-gallon buckets, shovels, and as many people as you can. Get over there. Bye. Click. I just called around, and it just seemed like the thing to do. It's like, well, obviously I can't lift a 5-gallon bucket. I'm not going to need help over there, but I can certainly phone people. I know my neighbors. So that's what we did. We saved their house, and it was awesome.
Oh my God, Michelle. I can't believe that 7.5 years into this show, I can still be wowed by. I'm like, I usually have like 9 follow-up questions. I'm like speechless. Like that. First of all, I'm a parent with a 6 and 8-year-old, so I am very familiar with these ages. Like, these are very recent ages for me. So I'm trying to think of the like aptitude. My youngest, like, could maybe have pulled this off, like I could see her being like, let's call these people. But the fact that you knew people's numbers and like knew to ask that question and went and did it and they believed you, like you weren't just pranking. You imagine like you're just pranking through the call list. Phone tree. It's Michelle. Michelle's the phone tree. Leave it to the 5-year-old. I mean, that just shows that innately who you are. Like there's a way you observe the world and take action, and you decide where you're best going to fit. Like what can you do to support the situation? And obviously you care deeply. Like, the context for this was really important because you care deeply about that particular neighbor. So maybe you're even more invested in this working out, right? But I mean, wherever you go, there you are. I mean, it's your origin story right there. So what kind of, I mean, sounds like a pretty rural area. We're talking about acreage. Like, so I imagine, you didn't have an enormous school. What was your class size when you graduated?
Well, those are 2 different questions. So it was a rural school. I think we had about 25, 30 kids per class, but there's a huge area that they all came in from. So we were on a 10-acre lot, which, to give you your average city house, I think your average city block might be about 10 acres, might be 5 acres, kind of thing.
Wow.
So if you're into agriculture and you actually know the answer, feel free to put it in the chat. That'd be great. Help me out. So it was a substantial area, and again, it's Canada, so winter is freezing and below. It was a trek, and Maria would often phone my mom and go, "Hey, Michelle's over here. She's fine." And I'm sure my mom was
I was
having
just
a
thinking about how you
right?
like would sneak out of the house.
This is
like,
the early 70s, right? We didn't have cell phones. We didn't have pagers. We didn't have.
Right.
I bet you we probably had 4-digit phone numbers. So we might have even had a party line still at that time.
Mm-hmm.
So it was, mom she had 5 kids, and she was doing laundry and doing all the stuff that back then was arduous work. It's still arduous work. God knows I would not have 5 children. Any woman who has more than 1 child, I just bow down and go, you are a goddess. And everybody around you should too, because they are crazy little people with your personality stuffed into a little itty bitty body. So crazy.
I'm trying to picture like kind of the area you're growing up in, only because I think that influences a lot of like you said, there was a time period, there was also the area.
Right.
It wasn't like an urban space. Like you being out and about was sort of part of nature. It's like something you probably grew up doing. And when you were, I don't know, 12 or so years old, did you have some sense of what you wanted to be when you grew up? Was
Not
there a
at
path
all.
that your family kind of set you on, or was it something you were really excited about?
So a friend of mine and I, she always thought for sure I'm going to be a teacher. And so her parents bought her the little teacher set, the little chalkboard and stuff. We do the little classes and stuff. I hated being told what to do. So her opportunity to be the teacher was very short-lived. I loved telling her what to do, but it was never in an academic sort of way. I said, well, I'm probably going to teach people, but probably not like this. It's like, no. I was more the, let's go get on the horses and go run, see where we end up. Let the horses take us there and see how it goes down. So I had no clue what I wanted to do. And the problem was I got into grade 12 and I had no clue what I wanted to do. I got into university. I had no clue what I wanted to do. Dropped out of university. Still had no clue what I wanted to do. And what I've discovered, though, is that we were doing accounting when pivoting was cool. I decided to count how many pivots I've had. I have had 28 solid career changes. So not just like a little, oh, we need to nudge this. It's like, let's go from finances into retail. Let's go from retail into dental assisting. Let's go from dental assisting into like swings of contrast. And what I've found is as a speaker and a business coach, it helps me immensely to be able to pull up metaphors for people so that they can understand what I'm talking about. Even if I'm just talking about, there's 3 pillars of business. You have marketing, sales, fulfillment. How does this go down? I can explain it to a 5-year-old and going, hey, you have a lemonade stand. This is your sign that says lemonade, 25 cents. That's your marketing. The conversation you have with the car that pulls over, those are your sales. Collecting that 25 cents and giving them the lemonade, that's your fulfillment. Okay, great. We got a business acumen. And being able to draw on any of that, to be able to explain to people what it is that they need to get, like, okay, now it totally makes sense. Because to me, we overcomplicate business so badly.
I'm sort
How
of
do we
curious. I want to
simplify
hear
this?
more of this journey, Michelle,
Yeah.
because I mean, that's a lot of pivots to happen. And in one way, it feels like a broken road. But in reverse, in 2020 hindsight, does it make more sense?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah. So
Burnout.
okay, so you go to university, you don't stick with it. You find yourself having to make some kind of money. What was the first thing you were drawn to?
Well, the first job I had, very first, was working at Arby's or something like that. I was terrible at it. It's so bad. Yeah, people should not hire 15-year-olds and expect them to be able to do jobs. Just saying. Micromanaging 15-year-olds is probably a good idea. Then I went into what did I do after that? Well, then I went into waitressing. So I waitressed everything from bars, cheap bars, up to high class restaurants, up to remote restaurants. One good story was I went up tree planting because I needed to make money. We were going to go to climb Mount Kilimanjaro, so I needed to make some quick money fast. So I said, okay, tree planting is the way to go. That was a terrible idea. Don't recommend it at all. But it put me in really good shape so that when the foreman fired me and said, like, you can't do this for another 2 months, I said, that's quite all right. I'm going to move to this little town with my boyfriend at the time, became a waitress, and I could carry 2 turkey trays full of stuff. So turkey trays are the great big trays, or I refer to them, the big ones. And we'd fill them up with pitchers of beer and meals and all sorts of stuff. So I could work the patio and I could bring out a whole table of food and drinks all at once. So that for the next 6 weeks or whatever it was, I ended up making like $7,000 in 1988. And it was like, okay, let's go to Mount Kilimanjaro. Broke up with my boyfriend, went, oh, we're not going to Mount Kilimanjaro. Now what do I want to do?
When did you start on a career path after waiting tables for a while, since that maybe wasn't your calling, even though you got good at carrying the tricky trays? How did you start to figure out what you wanted to do after so many years of not knowing? What was the first thing that you hooked onto?
Well, and that was kind of the problem is I didn't. So I would go, hey, what do I want to do? What are my circumstances? What do I need to fit my career into? So when I came back from my jaunt out to Ontario, lived in Ottawa for a while, went back to Edmonton. and decided I needed a career, but I wanted to graduate at the same time as my boyfriend who I had met at university. So he was in his 4th year. I was just starting. So what do I want to be when I grow up? I had to have something that was out in the middle of nowhere because he was in parks and rec. It had to be 1 year. And there was something else. And I ended up with aviation metallurgy, dental assisting, and something else. And I went, aviation metallurgy would be awesome. That'd be fantastic. But there's no airports in the middle of nowhere to be with him. So I was like, okay, apparently I'm going to be a dental assistant. I did that for, half an hour and realized I'd rather be the dentist than the dental assistant. So then I came up with this huge convoluted plan, ended up in Nunavut in the Northwest Territories. That got kiboshed within a month. So I wasn't going on my dental journey. It's another long story.
So I'm kind of curious.
Long story short, it wasn't until 2003 when I actually grew up and decided I wanted to be.
a good period of time later. I mean, you're allowed to play around your 20s.
If your kids are completely out there and they're doing this, that, and the other thing, don't worry about it. It'll all work out.
So about 20 years ago, Michelle hit her stride. What was the thing that finally kind of put you into a path that felt better for you?
Well, at that point, we were taking, my boyfriend at the time and I were taking personal development courses, and we stumbled upon Bob Proctor. And he said there are rules of nature that govern success. And if you live in accordance with those laws, success becomes inevitable. And I went, sounds logical. Because before that, it was like, hey, be a good person and good things will happen to you. And I went, and that's probably not going to work for me. And 2, I need a little bit more, something a little more stable to hook my flag into. And so at that conference, we bought all of his courses that he was selling. We delved into them. But even on the plane back, a lot of times I bought stuff and then just dumped it. His stuff, I went through every inch of it. And within 6 months, I noticed my finances had changed, my career trajectory had changed, my relationships with my teenage sons had changed. Everything was improving and improving vastly. And I went, okay, there's something to this. So he put out a email or whatever and said, hey, we're doing a course. Do you want to become certified? By the time I signed up for the course, by the time I took it, we had registered a company, changed all our plans, said, this is what I'm going to do for a living. And that's when I decided that I'm going to figure out this whole coaching, speaking thing and teach people how to create success so that they're not fumbling and diving all over the place or feeling like it's an aimless road.
So before you got to this Bob Proctor conference, you had already been sort of delving in the world of self-help, it sounds like, for a little bit. What got you on that path?
I was, so I'm going to back up the bus a couple of times here. So I was in a company working with, that's what it was. So my son was little and I decided that I was in finances. I said, I can't do this anymore because I was working evenings and weekends. He started school and I said, I need to go 9 to 5 so that I can be with him when he's done school. And so I needed something that was grown up and predictable. I found a job as a receptionist at a company that was a tech company. It was one of the first companies that was working on kind of cloud technology. We didn't call it that back then. It was licensing and all sorts of techie jargon. But it was a ton of fun in that one of the things that they wanted me to do, or I was bored out of my mind as a receptionist, let's just put it that way. And I was taking on whatever jobs I could. The phone system came up. They were internalizing the server for it. And I said, well, can I manage it? Because it just makes sense that I know who's where in the office. Because if somebody moves offices, I need to know what their extension is. I need to know where they are. I'm kind of the hub of the phone system. They agreed. Let me take this on. And I got hooked on the tech bug and never been anywhere close to, like, computers to us was an option in high school. It was nothing. And being able to do that, working with management and going, okay, so here's how the server works, here's how everything works. I said, I can do the voiceovers, that's fine. So I did all the voiceovers for the phone systems. I pretty much engulfed myself into the company for that. There were mergers, acquisitions, .bomb hit. I went, okay, now what can I do? Found another a phone company that was merging into, at that time, how to use cell phone technology and data. So things like bus couriers. So in the city where the couriers are riding their bikes and stuff, they would have these phones that at the time it was like you got to know what was going on back then. It sounds really stupid now, but they had no capacity to be able to know, other than a page, what their next drop off was and what they were picking up. So they'd get there and there'd be this huge box, but they didn't have a bag for it, or like whatever. So they wanted to have something where they could get a little bit more data in, and they could see what their next stop was, so that the cyclists could approve or disapprove their jobs. And you couldn't do that before smartphones, because there wasn't an app for that back then. So I said, this sounds really cool. I think I can work with this. So basically I worked with businesses like the couriers to figure out how to create software programs for the phones to be able to give some data to the people while they were working with things.
Someone had to be there. Like it's on this show.
It was like we had rocks and we had hammers.
Yeah, I met someone on this show who hosted the first telesummit. You know, like someone had to, right? Like you're like, we have these couriers on bikes and they got to figure out like what's happening. I mean, now we've got people delivering food, right? Where you're like, just pick up your phone, you order food. It's amazing. Yeah, we all started somewhere. So is it within the context of this that you first got into personal development or self-help and all that good stuff?
So then I decided I'm going to go and start my own company again, because by this time I was like, I can't work for other people.
You keep going. So you keep going in and out of entrepreneurship, it sounds like. So throughout your whole career, you worked a little bit with people in a job, and you worked sometimes self-employed, but all kinds of self-employed, it sounds like.
Right. Yes.
Yeah.
So there is a nice mixture of what I did when I was working with people and a nice mixture of what I did as an entrepreneur.
Did you have any entrepreneurs in your life as you were developing all this? Like when you first got started and you first thought about being an entrepreneur, were there people in your life who were entrepreneurs?
My sister and my brother used to try everything and anything to make money. So one of my favorite of their ventures was trying to sell manure at the end of the driveway. And I'm like, okay, one, anybody that wants manure is not going to drive by looking for it. And two, anybody who drives by here has a plethora of their own amount of manure. They don't need to buy it from you. I think something's off in your marketing. Keep in mind, I am 6 and 8 years younger than them. Mm-hmm. So they're looking at me like, how would you know this? I'm like, well, it's a dumb idea. How do you sell things to people that have copious amount
no urgency?
Like, no shortage going on. So that was the extent of my entrepreneurialness. My dad was an electrician for his entire career. What I did have was the push off of, I am never going to do the same thing in my life for 60 years. That is not going to happen. Like I saw the stuff that he put himself through in order to kind of stay on the straight and narrow. And because he was super smart and wanted to make things easier for people, but entrepreneurs like to make things difficult and don't like to listen to smart ideas that simplify their life, especially the ones that he worked for. So, or with on contracts.
I'm just interested in the people that were around you, because a lot of times entrepreneurship is not a thing. Like it's almost okay. So like you might know of a Bob Proctor or some other big name, but you don't realize that you could be a speaker yourself. Like I've heard that kind of story happen a lot. Or someone saying like this big name speaker came to this company that I was at, and I went up to them and I said, "Oh my God, I love what you do. How do I do that?" You know, like, and like just because we weren't introduced to these concepts, these ideas that were outside the 9 to 5 job that maybe a handful of people in our neighborhood did. But it sounds like you experimented. You have a very interesting approach to life. You want to keep trying the newness. But it's also that you build on the things you've done before. So you haven't like forgotten everything you've done. It's all, like you said, it helps you come up with better analogies for the people you work with today. But this idea of personal development and like enriching yourself, even that back then is not a common, like there's, you know what I mean? Like it's kind of like almost saying yoga back then was a subculture thing. And now it's like, you know, we have brands for like, we have, you know, people who are influencers in the yoga space. But back then, like these things were not widely known, which is what gets me curious about how you stumble into these spaces, because clearly that Bob Proctor experience you had really was hugely influential. But it wasn't that you just walked in. There was a bunch of series of moments that had to happen to get you to be in that space, to be open, to be A, in that space, and B, be open, and to even know the difference between the quality of what he was offering and the crap that you'd had before. Because I heard you say you didn't always listen to the stuff that you bought, but you could tell based on what you'd already, you know, listened to or knew about, that this really was different. That's kind of curious to me how you know, like the exposure you have at that time. There's no internet. You know, it's all word of mouth. Like, who's influencing you to do these things, and how are you getting set on this path that ended up being where you are today?
That's a great question. I think that the biggest catalyst, well, two things. So one was my sister. She was always been there and always had to be, how do I make money? And I'm not under anybody's thumb when it comes to making money. So she did everything from, she was a waitress at a bar, and she used to cash in $100,000 a month and win award after award for the amount of money that she could bring in. When she set herself onto a goal, and it was like, okay, who can help me to achieve this? And I will find a way to make it happen. And I think that was kind of paramount. Two, she always focused on kind of an abundance thinking. So when she was broke, she always had like 6 bars of soap on the counter, because it was just a sign that, hey, there's abundance out there and I just need to go and find it. So when I was working at these tech companies, I decided I wanted to open up a, basically it was web development, but it was web programming at that time. And it was through them, I think Harv Eker came into town with Millionaire Mindset. And I went, well, that's intriguing. How do I turn this into $1 million business? So we did that, and I convinced my partner at the time, my boyfriend, who was one of the managers at the tech company that I started as a receptionist. So he was my boss, and I was at that company, and he had run his own series of companies before that, and he was a consultant at that company. So he wasn't an employee of theirs. He was a consultant for them. And it had to have been in the conversations with these people that clearly I'm not your typical receptionist. Clearly there's something else going on here. And we would spend hours after work just socializing with the team and just getting to know what everybody else is doing. We were talking about ideas and tech and everything. Like, work didn't stop at the end of the day. We hung out and did a ton of stuff together. And I think that probably was a catalyst to me taking the Millionaire Mindset and going, okay, I'm going to turn this into a viable business. And then when I saw Bob, I went, okay, I'm not doing that anymore. The coaching side of things. This is where I'm going to get the knowledge I need in order to be able to do the thing. And then 15 years later, we switched back into the digital marketing tech company that did websites and stuff like that.
Yeah. But it sounds like you're also paying attention to well, there's a few things. One, you're often operating within constraints. So a lot of the choices you made about where you worked was based on the constraints of what your current situation sort of would be best situated to do. So you can think of it as constraints, but you can also think of it as you making decisions that were good for you as opposed to the other way around, letting the world make decisions for you. So that's a more positive spin on that description. And then even when you were employed, self-employed, I should say, you were still reading the room and seeing like what the market needed and just like thinking about how you would contribute to it. I say all this in the context of a person myself who I feel like pretty much every year, every 18 months, the last 5 years, I have come up with another like thing that I'm putting front and center for my business. I don't let go of the other things. I still get interviews for some of the stuff from 10 years ago, which is totally fun. The longevity of that content is wonderful, but like the newness. I think we both have that, like, I'm in the middle of I'm in the beginning, I should say, of a new project, and I have like, it hasn't even made me a dime yet, right? But I'm like super excited by it,
Right?
but the possibilities of it. So it sounds like you have similar motivation. The business part's interesting too, because there's a lot of trial and error in being a business owner. What
Right.
strengths did you bring to that, and where did you feel like you needed to get other help? Like, what was not your lane, clearly, when it came to running a business?
Uh, so many stories. Oh, yeah, such good questions, and it brings up this strain of, I thought I had to be good at the nuts and bolts of a business. So if you look at Michael Gerber's eMyth, I was not the technician that said, "Hey, I'm really good at painting. I think I'll start a painting company." That was not me. It was, "Hey, I suck at everything. I think I should run a company." People that do the thing for me. And it wasn't so much just because I sucked at something, but I did buy into that negativity for a very long time. It was like, those who can't do teach. I bought into that, and it was really silly and naive of me to do that. But at the same time, it couldn't work for me. I understand systems and strategies. I understand patterns, right? And I think it kind of sort of all comes back to, I see the neighbor's house on fire, and all of a sudden it's like, okay, people who are good at what they got to do, got to go and do it, and I will orchestrate how this all goes down. Even though I'm like 2 foot nothing, and hey,
I'm not going to forget that story. I'm going to just tell you, like, it's going to stick with me for a while.
And I think, had I had a mentor in my life going, you know what, this is your pivot story, this is your evolution story, stick with this. It's okay that you're doing these things that excite you and that fascinate you, but that thing that you do so easy that it's as easy as breathing is the thing in business that most people don't get. And it's being able to, so you had 6 questions in there, and remind me where I was going with that direction. It was being able to know what I was good at in the business. And when I saw Bob, I realized I can do websites. I can do programming. This is not my forte. This is not the thing that makes people happy when I do it. What makes them happy when I do it is having the meeting with them, going, hey, this business idea you have, we can totally manifest this. We can create something 3-dimensional that is just a thought in your mind right now. It can happen. Here's how you do it. Here's how we simplify this process. Here's who we get in position to do those things. And it was really, I mean, the influence of entrepreneurs around me definitely helped. I wish they had a little bit more clout in their assistance with me. It was more like, hey, that's a good idea. I think I'll go do that. So it was more of what they modeled to me and how I took it and ran with it.
Coaching was such a novel concept in early 2000, late 90s. I've gotten a chance to interview a few people who were more pioneers in that time frame. I have memories in 2004, 2005, 2006, meeting with people at a coffee shop a block away from my office. My job started at 10 because I made my own hours. And I would meet people from 9 to like 9:55 with my brain and my BlackBerry, which gives you a sense of the time frame that this was. And I did not call it coaching. I didn't have that word in my vocabulary at all. I wasn't charging. My mom got mad about the fact that I wasn't charging. It's like, you got to get paid. And I said, it's where I first defined my philosophy of abundance. I said, it's like giving rides to an airport. You give a ride to someone who you have a relationship with, and you have the resources of time and a car, and they would appreciate it. They'd think of it as a favor. And so that's how I operated back then. And it's still how I operate. But that idea back then of naming myself as a coach was so beyond what I had. But it sounds like you started to kind of fall into a space where that was being talked about, where you could identify and define your work under that umbrella, which gave you kind of a framework to pursue a business that wasn't about selling a thing. Like, it's like you said, you realized that your real value wasn't so much in the product you created for them, but in the conversations you had about their business. And
Mhm.
that's an incredible distinction to have at that point when, you would say coach and they'd say, oh, do you wear a whistle all the time? Like they were thinking about
Right.
athletic coach, they like don't get it. And so it's pretty cool that you found your way through that. In the last few years, what's been the focus of your business now? I'm imagining there's been 5 or 6 pivots since then. Like, what's your current focus? Like, if I was meeting with somebody and I thought this is a perfect person to introduce to Michelle, I think they're a great prospect. What is that person talking about or complaining about?
Right. They are, if they're talking about it, they are complaining about, quote unquote, the success of the business. My ideal client is the client that is successful in their business and they've created up to the point where it's a complete and total disaster behind the facade. So when entrepreneurs get brilliant ideas and they start building out and they start gathering people together, and it's like, hey, okay, go and do this. And now all of a sudden they're micromanaging people and they don't have a clue how to get their fingers out of it. Or they're going, okay, I can borrow from Peter to pay Paul and we'll make it another month. Profit, what's profit? Profit is that illusion that keeps me in business for another month. So, they're on the outside, it looks like a great business. On the inside, it feels like a complete disaster waiting to explode. Those are my favorite clients because they don't realize that that is a fundamental stage of business. And with a little bit of tweaking and a little bit of massaging, we can put systems and things in place that allows them to be able to step away from the chaos and allow somebody else to put their order into that process. And magic happens, and it can happen quickly. So it's as you start getting used to business, it'll happen kind of at the $30,000 mark. You start to get some in there. You get another one at about the $600,000 mark when you're hitting $1 million, and then you get another one at about 3 million. You get another one at about 11 million, and they go up. And it's being able to understand when those kind of plateaus hit. It's not a bad thing. It's a fantastic thing. You're at the point where you've done enough to know what works, what doesn't work. The problem is you're doing both, and you don't know how to give up the stuff that doesn't work and still allow the stuff that works to keep functioning. And it often takes a separate set of eyes to look at it and go, hey, I get it. You feel like a cat stuck on a dam. You've got your fingers in these holes. And it's like, I know I don't want to be hanging here anymore. I'm very tired of hanging here. I need to unplug my fingers. But if I do the wrong ones, I'm going to go flying off the dam.
Right.
I don't want to do this.
Reminds me of the video of the cat I just saw who's like hanging from something and trying to scramble back up onto the perch. So here's my curiosity as you say this, though. These people probably aren't talking about it, right? Because they have this like facade of success. And so, what's the problem they have that they're willing to admit? I always call that the little p problem, not the big problem that they have no idea. They don't even think that's a thing they could even think about. But like what are they Googling, or what are they asking a friend about? Like, what's the little thing that they're willing to say, yeah, this thing's happening, as the house is on fire, but they don't want to talk about that part yet.
Yeah. So oftentimes when they're talking to their friends, people are going, hey, how's business? They're going, oh, fine. It's great. You get those stoic answers. Like, no, it's not. I don't know if they're vocalizing their problems so much as they are trying to avoid them.
How do you find these people then?
I'm just so curious. As a business like this.
Yeah, as a business growth strategy coach, right? I'm sorry, I have my other hat on. I'm multi-passionate entrepreneur here as well. So I'm like, wait, if you were my client and I was like, okay, I see that you can help people, like, but like, yeah, so I could see how you have to be visible and public and have good media coverage out, just have your message and marketing be out there, because people really have to be attracted into you. They have to hear that, they have to hear themselves in your story and like what you're saying, and they're like, wait, that sounds like me. And that would lure them into like, wait, there is a solution. They hadn't even thought of it. Oftentimes
they're Googling things like, kill me now. How do I get out of my business without dying? like they're typing in obscure stuff like, is success really a thing? Like they're they're so stressed behind the scenes that they're not thinking logically. They're not grappling like, how do I create systems in my business? They're not doing stuff like that.
I think about this, Michelle, because I have sometimes coaching clients or prospects who tell me that they want to make $1 million. They're not, by the way, in mid six figures when they say that. They're in like not quite 100,000.
Yeah.
And so it's like, and sometimes they can't afford to work with me, right?
Yeah.
Like the mindset is also not there. But I'm like, I don't want $1 million business. Like,
right.
First of all, I want a business that's profitable.
Yes.
So the more people I have to build on my team to deliver services, the less I have to take home myself. So I want to find that equilibrium of high value to my clients and profit coming in. And I want to pay good people to do good work. And I want to be not the only person who knows how to do something. So it's like, I want to have some bench strength. And I love the idea of working with consultants for that reason, or like 1099s and subcontractors, because you get a lot of support. But I think the people who just sort of say, I want $1 million business, like I think we should have a panel of people who have $1 million businesses talking about what it's actually like.
No, you don't. And I often tell people, if you're in certain kinds of businesses, you can have 10 clients paying you 10 grand a year and have 100 grand. It's 100% profit. Awesome. Like everything you have almost is a write-off. Almost all of that will be profit. And that is a fantastic way to live. There is, one, nothing wrong with it. Two, it's got ultimate flexibility. You can go travel the world. You can do it for money. Why wouldn't you do this all the time? You have to be a special kind of crazy to go, hey, I want staff. Hey, I want,
Well, and that growth, like you said, moving from a solopreneur who just knows how to do their job to now being in charge of, having to find someone else who'll help you with sales, or finding like you start to have to outsource some of the things that you do, but you don't do as well as someone else could do. And that is a whole different enterprise.
Right.
I think it's cool to know that there are people like you to help right the ship. I have heard of other people who help, and I'm showing this out to you because it could be an interesting angle, generationally handing down businesses. Like the third generation is an interesting place for you to go, because it's totally different game for the third generation than the first two. Like, I mean,
especially right now.
Yeah.
Right. Especially right now. If you have like a 60-year-old, 70-year-old parent that's stepping away from the business, and you happen to be a 30, 40, 50-year-old even taking over that business, technology is 1,000% different than it was when your parents took over from their parents. When you understand kind of a generational business that operates, it's fundamental, everything works, all you have to do is the same thing I've been doing for the last 50 years. You will create a successful venue for your family and take it over and do it your way once I'm out of the picture and I can't freak out anymore.
Yeah.
Now, when somebody's taking over from their parents, you want to be looking at, what are my systems? What are my operations? Am I hiring people that are local just because it seemed like a good idea at the time? Every aspect, marketing, sales, fulfillment, is 100% completely different, or potentially 100% different. And that can be terrifying, not only for the parent that's giving up the business, but also for the staff, also for the clientele. Everybody's kind of freaking out, going, oh my God, what are you going to do with this? And that can have a lot of responsibility and a lot of added stress to them. It can also lead to somebody being rebellious and making a lot of stupid decisions, because oftentimes, just because there's a nice new shiny whistle, a nice piece of software that's out there, it's not necessarily the right thing to do. And you certainly don't want to stop what's working in order to try something new. You want to keep doing what's working and try something new and see that. So that whole juxtaposition of, am I really in control? Am I not in control? What does my market expect from me? I mean, generational businesses
those listening,
are fascinating.
I think that we've identified one sort of market that you help that you could more or less identify. And so if they hear of generational businesses being passed down, that'd be one indication there's something afoot that could be examined. It's a good moment to decide that there's some urgency in figuring things out. I once had a client a coaching client figure out that if she contacted an executive director, she worked with boards, nonprofit boards around fundraising. If she got in touch with a new executive director 6 months after they joined, they were more open to like bringing her in. If she called them right away, they were still just trying to figure out their left foot from the right foot. Like there was just nothing going on.
Exactly.
And if
Yeah.
she waited 18 months, they'd already made all their decisions and they were doing implementation. So I think finding like, yeah, like what is that moment? And then letting your whole world know so they know to send people that they hear of in that moment. I have a question about your network as we shift to the end of this. Do you have any habits, philosophies, or practices for keeping in touch with your larger network, the people that you met once a year at a conference or you worked with 5 years ago, the people you really hit it off with, but you don't see all the time?
Absolutely. And there's again, you got to be special kind of crazy to do things the way I do. Do what I say, don't do what I do. So I run 5 podcasts and I interview people that are in business or serving and supporting other businesses. And I love doing those interviews because then I get to find out kind of what they're up to, how they're doing it. And we're looking at business from a different perspective. So it gives me 30 minutes, an hour to be able to talk to people. Again, I also run networking events and I also run roundtables where people can come in and we organize kind of what's a topic of discussion and be able to kind of hash it out and come up with some ideology around them.
We're going to have to get links to all your shows and your networking events and your roundtables in the show notes. Before we get to my final wrap-up question, we're going to do a quick pause to hear from our sponsor. My favorite wrap-up question. So it's a year from now. Michelle, you and I are not losing touch, so it's not going to wait a whole year. But let's say it's a year from now, and I'm like, wait, it was about a year ago that I interviewed you. I'm going to be asking you a year from now, what are you celebrating? So what are we going to be toasting a year from now? What are you most looking forward to in the year ahead?
I am currently working on a ton of projects. Not surprising. So the things I'm going to be celebrating is a program called Creating Legacy that I'm working on for business owners, entrepreneurs, to help them to identify what is important to them that they want to leave as a legacy, possibly towards their family, possibly towards the business world, but definitely on the planet. And that to me is super exciting. I'm also working on some fun, silly projects like selling artwork. And a year from now, I am going to be selling art in galleries and with interior designers. And then I also have a secret little business that I'm working on. And hopefully that one comes to fruition too.
I cannot wait to celebrate and support all that happening.
Thank you.
That's amazing. I love meeting other multi-passionate, multi-hyphenate, whatever you might call us, distracted entrepreneurs who love to get into new things. How can people find you and follow your work?
Wonderful. Look up Michelle Nedelec. And I know that sounds weird, but there's 5 of us on the planet. I'm the only one that speaks English. So if you get to my platform and I speak English, that's me. Awareness Strategies is the name of my company, but go to michellenedelec.com and you will be dazed and amazed with all of the things that I have. And you can find the one that interests you and go from there.
Fantastic. We'll put all the links we've talked about in the show notes at ontheschmooze.com. Thank you so much, Michelle, for this conversation.
Thank you for having me. I had a ton of fun.